The MLB offseason is off to the races, and things have been surprisingly quiet surrounding this Philadelphia Phillies team. With a crucial offseason at hand, Dave Dombrowski recently met with Todd Zolecki to break down what the Phillies are trying to do and kind of their mindset heading into this offseason. So I want to break down exactly what he said regarding the statuses of players like Alec Bohm, who we constantly hear attached to the trade rumors as the offseason begins to kick off, and things have been kind of surprisingly quiet around the league. Obviously, everybody waiting on the Juan Soto domino to start off this MLB offseason, but it has been a little, I guess, surprising to me why we have heard not as much concrete rumors and reports connecting to specific names at this point in the game. Still very early and a lot to go down, but let's dive into what Dombrowski said and take things from here. So once again, he did meet with Todd Zolecki here, breaking things down. And the article from Todd writes, there is speculation that Soto could choose a team before the end of next week's winter meetings in Dallas. Sources recently told MLB.com that the Phillies have not met with Soto. There had been expectation that they might meet with him at some point, but nothing appeared imminent. The Phils have never been considered likely to sign Soto anyway, so none of this should come as a surprise to Phillies fans. President of Baseball Operations Dave Dombrowski said a couple times since the end of the postseason that he doesn't believe the Phillies need another superstar player to win a World Series. Phillies managing partner John Middleton said at a Penn event last month, quote, I'm afraid Juan Soto wants to be in New York, and I don't mind being the stalking horse. But I get the feeling we'll probably say, we'll probably not win this. Dombrowski said this week that his offseason priorities have not changed. An outfielder to play left field or center field, a late inning right-handed reliever, and a number 5 starter. So some pretty good stuff there, and I do appreciate the bluntness with what he's speaking with as far as positions. I do think, to his credit, Dave Dombrowski, one of the more forward-facing executives in baseball and really across sports as far as the honesty that he is kind of letting loose with here. Now, granted, that can bite you in the end, and he kind of alludes to this in some of these quotes I will get to next. But I will just say my final piece on the Soto conversation. I never thought the Phillies were legitimate contenders for him, but it is disappointing to me to not even get in the room and make your pitch. There was a lot of overlap from players on this team, the Bryce Harpers, the Trey Turners, Kevin Long as his former hitting coach during their time with the Nationals there. I'd have liked to at least be mentioned in the same breath of the Mets and Yankees and Blue Jays and Red Sox and these teams finally in it. I think it's a good thing as an organization to be in the mix for the top players, and Soto certainly takes that cake for this year as he's going to sign a super lucrative contract, which I cannot wait to see what the final dollar figure is. Now, to continue on with some of what Dombrowski said here, the article continues to say how they get there is unclear. Fangraphs already projects the Phillies' 2025 payroll to be $282 million for luxury tax purposes, which currently is the second highest projected payroll in baseball and pushes them past the third luxury tax threshold at $281 million. The fourth threshold is $301 million. Quote, we have the freedom to do some things that we need to do, Dombrowski said regarding payroll, but I'm not sure what's going to happen at this point. The reality is, when you look at where we are, a lot of clubs had very little movement overall, but you can see it starting to break a little bit. But you just never know about these things. It's not like we're on the verge of doing something, but we've had a lot of conversations. So playing it a little bit coy there, but I think what is important to note is this isn't for lack of money or willingness to spend for this Phillies team. The second highest payroll. It is clear that the chips are in the middle, and I give John Middleton a ton of credit for being willing to foot that bill and really baseball being important to him. I think that gets lost in a lot of ownership situations in which this is purely looked at as a business venture. That is not the case for John Middleton, and I will continue to always tip my cap to that. But I think he's a model for how owners should look to run their sports teams, and hopefully the Phillies can prove every dollar that he invests worth it in the long run. Now, to continue on to what is written here, Dombrowski wouldn't comment on specifics. Quote, we are looking to acquire major league talent, he said. That's really what we're looking to do. Win the big league level. That's our focus. The Phillies need someone who can play left or center, with Brandon Marsh able to play either position. Dombrowski said the Phillies probably will acquire one right-handed late-inning reliever, despite free agent right-handers Carlos Estevez and Jeff Hoffman pitching in the late innings last season. And it continues on to say, quote, the way I look at it is we have a very good team, Dombrowski said. We won a lot of games last year. We won our division. We basically have mostly our whole club back. We're not an age club, which I would disagree with that part. I look at us as having a very good club going into next year. We've got 4 starting pitchers at the top of the rotation who are as good as anybody's. We have a good offensive balance from the right-handed side and the left-handed side. We need to fill a bullpen spot, but we have a really good club. We didn't play well against the Mets, but the reality is we have a really good club, and I think we'll have a really good club next year. Quote, now we're open-minded to things. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that because it's apparent that people have taken that and kind of run with it. Guilty. But yeah, you're always open-minded. And so the reality is we're open-minded. We're talking to people, but we have a good club. If we take the same club back that we had last year and make a tweak here or there, a tweak here or a tweak there, I think we'll compete to win the division and be in a position where we'll be definite postseason contenders. So this is the difficult spot that the Phillies find themselves in. They're a good baseball team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Obviously, they did not reach the goals that were clear, but where the problem comes is I do think people overstate or understate how difficult it is to win the overall championship. That if you're going to set that goal every year, every team but one is going to come up short of it there. Now, with this Phillies team as they're currently constructed, you've made your long-term investments into your key players, the Bryce Harpers, the Trey Turners, and the Trey Turner contract, I do really feel could be one that handcuffs them a little bit more than we're being led on to acknowledge at this point in time. At this point, we're 2 years into the Trey Turner experience. You got to live with it. You got to sleep in the bed that you made right here, and hopefully that he can still take his game to a level that we have not quite seen just yet. Certainly was better last year than the first year of him, but we're looking at Turner as a really pillar of this franchise, and that needs to continue to be the case. He needs to grow into that. Now, when looking at how to upgrade it, it is these good players trying to become great players. Alec Bohm is a key name that pops to the conversation and has been a guy that has been constantly mentioned in trade rumors since really the season ended there. We obviously remember him being benched in that playoff series. There is a lot of concern with kind of his mannerisms, his expressions on the field, not quite carrying himself as the consummate professional, and even guys like AJ Przinsky sort of leaking that and directly saying that the Phillies want him to grow up a little bit, or kind of disappointing that has not happened to that point. But once again, with that, is Alec Bohm is a good baseball player, coming off a season in which he started the All-Star game at third base for the National League, had 15 home runs, 97 RBIs, a .332 on-base percentage, 40 walks in 554 at-bats. He had 155 hits here. He's a good player. So in order for it to be worth it for them to move on from Alec Bohm, you have to find a player that is better than him here. And that's kind of the conversation from top to bottom on this entire team. Another guy who constantly gets brought into the mix is Nick Castellanos here. Do I think Nick Castellanos is the perfect baseball player? Absolutely not. We've talked all about his chase rate, how frustrating it is when things are not going right, but this is still a guy who was one of the best players in the postseason for this Phillies team, had 23 home runs, 86 RBIs, a .311 on-base percentage there. The walks need to absolutely improve. The plate approach absolutely needs to get better. There's things to work on with Castellanos, but he was hot when it mattered most this year, and I think when factoring in what it would take to move on from him and the possibility of even having to pay some of that contract, to me, that's just not worth it at all. And then I brings a guy like Ranger Suarez, who continues to be mentioned in these same talks here. I'm very confused about this more so than anything. And my honest guess is they probably don't see a long-term world where you can sign Ranger beyond this season or get him to agree to a long-term contract beyond that. I don't understand why that would be the case, but this is a guy who absolutely has it to me. And I think it's important to separate when kind of speaking about really all athletes here. There's an intangible gift that you can't quite quantify here. That Ranger Suarez is a guy who has stones. That you throw him on the mound in any single opportunity, he's going to fight like hell to get you through it. And I thought this playoff specifically was a pure example of that he did not have his best stuff. He struggled for the whole second half of the year. But what did he do? He went out there and gutted it out and pitched just fine for this Phillies team here. So I do not want to see Ranger leave. I understand it seems very evident to me that they're very clearly trying to add another starter to the lineup. I mean, Dombrowski himself has clearly just directly said it here once again that they need an outfielder to play left or center field, a late inning right-handed reliever, and a number 5 starter here. I get that Taijuan Walker is more of the talking point here. There shouldn't, and I don't think there is any real belief that he can return to the form that they hoped he could pitch at when they did sign him to that notable contract. But the reality is, it feels like there's so many moving parts that it's going to take that one domino to fall before we get a picture of what this offseason is going to fully look like. I do think that there is going to be a trade here. I do think Alec Bohm is ultimately going to be one of those faces leaving this organization. But I did want to acknowledge what was tweeted out by Ruben Amaro Jr. here, which was particularly interesting to me. Obviously, a guy that is a former general manager of this Phillies team, certainly seems to have some intel, and a guy that works very closely with the Phillies, is a broadcaster, works in media, etc., etc. But on a little interaction on Twitter here, he was asked, as a former GM, what is your guesstimate that Alec Bohm will be traded? There has to be good reason for all the talk that it's likely to happen. Odds the Phillies acquire a starting pitcher, or if they trade Ranger, and the odds they get a right-handed outfielder. And Ruben replies, I rarely, if ever, handicap moves that are made because it's all nothing but speculation. But here it goes. 20% they trade Bohm, 85% they will get another starter, 2% they trade Ranger, 75% that they get an outfielder. So very clearly, the highest likelihood in the mind of Ruben Amaro Jr. is that they do add another starter, and next up being another outfielder. I do think that is absolutely certain to happen, that I don't see a world in which you can walk into this next season with these same World Series aspirations, with the belief that either Johan Rojas or Brandon Marsh can take the leap necessary to be that complete everyday starter. I unfortunately, and while I'm more optimistic about Rojas than I would probably say the general consensus, the reality is the bat is not there yet. He's still very young, 24 years old at this point, that he needs to go a long ways in a short amount of time. And I think competition is always the best thing for everybody here. So a lot still to unfold this offseason. It does feel like things are going to start to turn up in the coming days, that I'm kind of surprised the stalemate that has gone across Major League Baseball. I think this is far more impactful on the negotiation side of things than for the Phillies specifically. I think they kind of realize themselves they're out of the Soto sweepstakes. But if you are a team that is kind of watching this from afar and waiting for the fallout, you're probably not pulling the trigger on a trade until things are finalized. So hopefully once that goes down, we'll begin to talk about some actual transactions for this Phillies team. But I do respect Dave Dombrowski facing the music, speaking to the media with a little bit more honesty than we typically see is the case there. So let me know what you guys think on his comments in the comments there. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. I am desperate for some Phillies news and do think it is coming soon. So make sure you guys are tapping in with me to lock in when that does go down. So as always, appreciate you guys once again. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back talking with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.